The poker table in the back of the Silver Spur saloon reeked of stale whiskey and broken dreams. And Declan Garrett had grown accustomed to both over the past 3 years, since his wife died in childbirth along with their baby daughter. The year was 1878, and Boise, Idaho territory had transformed from a mining camp into a bustling town where fortunes changed hands faster than a dealer could shuffle cards. Declan watched the pile of chips in front of him dwindle with the same detached interest he showed most things these days. At 32 years old, he had already lived what felt like several lifetimes, none of them particularly worth remembering anymore. "I will see your $20, a rough voice announced across the table, "and raise you one woman." Declan glanced up from his cards to see Marcus Wheeler, a cattle rancher known more for his cruelty than his business acumen, gesturing toward a young woman standing near the bar. She wore a faded calico dress that had seen better days, her dark auburn hair pulled back in a simple braid. Even from across the smoke-filled room, Declan could see the exhaustion in her green eyes, the way she held herself with a strange mixture of dignity and resignation. "You cannot be serious," another player muttered. "Dead serious," Wheeler grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Got her contract legally bought 2 months ago when she could not pay her boarding house debt. Been working my ranch ever since, but I got no more use for her. She is a terrible cook and even worse at mending. Figure she is worth about $20 to somebody." The casual way Wheeler discussed another human being made Declan's stomach turn, though he kept his face carefully neutral. He had learned long ago that showing emotion in this town was the same as showing weakness. Still, something about the woman caught his attention. She stood perfectly still, her hands clasped in front of her, but he noticed the slight trembling of her fingers, the way her jaw clenched as Wheeler described her as though she were livestock. "I fold," Declan said quietly, setting down his cards. "Smart man," Wheeler laughed. "Terrible hand anyway, I would wager." Declan stood slowly, pulling out his leather wallet. He counted out $20 in bills and coins, placing them carefully on the table. The saloon had grown quieter, other patrons sensing something interesting was about to unfold. "What are you doing?" Wheeler asked, his grin fading. "Buying her contract," Declan replied simply. "You said she was worth $20. Here is your money." Wheeler's face reddened. "Now hold on a minute, that was a bet, not an actual sale." "You put her up as collateral in a poker game," Declan said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. "That makes it a legal wager in any court in the territory. You want to argue that point with Judge Morrison?" "Because I guarantee he would be interested to hear how you have been holding a woman in indentured servitude." The threat hung in the air between them. Everyone in Boise knew Judge Morrison had strong opinions about the treatment of workers, particularly women. Wheeler's face cycled through several shades of red before he finally grabbed the money from the table. "Fine. Take her. You will see what a poor bargain you made soon enough." Wheeler stormed out of the saloon, leaving Declan standing by the poker table with every eye in the room on him. He took a deep breath and walked over to where the young woman still stood, trying to ignore the curious stares and whispered conversations erupting around them. Up close, she was younger than he had initially thought, probably around 22 or 23. Her face bore the traces of too many hard days and not enough food, but her eyes held an intelligence and strength that no amount of hardship had managed to extinguish. She looked at him with a mixture of hope and wariness, like a wild animal unsure whether to run or trust. "What is your name?" he asked gently. "Rose Vaughn," she answered, her voice softer than he expected but steady. "Miss Vaughn, my name is Declan Garrett. I have your contract now, which means legally you owe me your labor until the debt is paid. But I want you to understand something clearly. I do not believe in keeping people against their will, and I did not buy your freedom just to trap you in another kind of prison." Rose blinked, clearly not expecting this response. "I do not understand. Come with me. We should talk somewhere less public." He led her out of the saloon into the cool evening air. The streets of Boise were still busy despite the late hour, with people moving between establishments and freight wagons rolling past, even as the sun set behind the Boise mountains. Declan walked to a small cafe 3 doors down that stayed open late, serving coffee and pie to miners coming off their shifts. Inside, he found them a corner table away from other patrons. The owner, a matronly woman named Mrs. Chen, who had immigrated from China a decade earlier, brought coffee without being asked. "When was the last time you ate a proper meal?" Declan asked Rose. She hesitated. "I ate this morning, some bread." "Mrs. Chen," Declan called out, "could we have 2 plates of whatever you have hot, please?" The older woman nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. Rose sat across from him, her hands wrapped around the coffee cup as though trying to absorb its warmth. "You really do not have to," she started. "I know I do not have to. I want to. Now, tell me how you ended up in Wheeler's service." Rose took a sip of coffee, gathering her thoughts. "I came to Boise 6 months ago from Kansas. My parents died last winter of pneumonia within days of each other. There was nothing left for me there, and I heard the Idaho territory had opportunities for women willing to work hard. I took what little money they left me and bought passage on a wagon train headed west." "That was brave," Declan said. "That was desperate," Rose corrected, but a small smile touched her lips. "When I arrived, I took a room at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house while I looked for work. I found a position as a seamstress, but the woman who hired me closed her shop after only 3 weeks. She gave me no warning, no final pay. I had enough money for another week's rent, maybe 2 if I ate very little. I kept looking for work, but nothing came through fast enough." Mrs. Chen returned with 2 steaming plates of beef stew and fresh bread. Rose stared at the food like she could not quite believe it was real. "Eat," Declan urged. "Please." She picked up her spoon with trembling hands and took a bite, then another. He could see her forcing herself to eat slowly, with dignity, even though she was clearly famished. He respected that show of self-control. "What happened when you could not pay the rent?" he prompted gently. "Mrs. Patterson sold my debt to Wheeler. She said she had no choice, that she ran a business, not a charity. Wheeler told me I would work off what I owed at his ranch, doing cooking and cleaning. He said it would take maybe 3 months, but every week he would add more charges. The food I ate, the space I occupied, the clothing he claimed I ruined. The debt never shrank, only grew." Declan felt anger building in his chest, but he kept his voice level. "Did he hurt you?" Rose met his eyes directly. "He tried once. I hit him with a cast iron pan hard enough to give him a scar over his left ear. After that, he kept his distance, but he also made it clear he could sell my contract to someone far worse if I caused any more trouble. I believed him." "You were smart to believe him. Wheeler runs with a rough crowd." Declan paused, watching her eat. "Here is what I propose. I have a small ranch about 5 miles outside of town. Nothing fancy, just 100 acres with some cattle, a few horses, and a house that could use a woman's touch. My wife died 3 years ago, and I have been living like a hermit ever since. The place is falling apart around me because I cannot find the energy to care about much of anything anymore." "I am sorry for your loss," Rose said quietly. "Thank you. What I am suggesting is that you come work for me, doing genuine work for genuine pay. I will provide room and board, plus $30 a month, which is fair wage for a housekeeper in these parts. You can work off your original debt to Mrs. Patterson legitimately, or if you prefer, I will forgive it entirely and you can simply start fresh. Either way, you will be free to leave whenever you choose. I will not add false charges and I will not lay a hand on you inappropriately. You have my word on that." Rose set down her spoon, studying his face carefully. "Why would you do this for a stranger? What do you get out of it?" It was a fair question, and Declan considered his answer carefully. "Honestly, maybe a chance to live in a house that does not look like a strong wind would knock it over. Maybe some company that is not just cattle and my own bitter thoughts. And maybe, just maybe, a chance to do one decent thing in a world that seems to have forgotten what decency means. You are a strange man, Mr. Garrett. Declan, please. And yes, I have been told that before." Rose finished her meal in silence, then met his eyes again. "I accept your offer, but I want to be clear that I will work hard and earn every dollar you pay me. I do not accept charity. I would not expect anything less. Can you ride a horse?" "Yes, my father taught me when I was young." "Good. We will head out to the ranch tomorrow morning. Tonight, I will pay for a room for you at the Grand Hotel. It is respectable, and the owner, Mr. Davies, is an honest man. You will be safe there." "I cannot let you pay for a hotel room," Rose protested. "Consider it an advance on your wages." "You have had a long day, Miss Vaughn. You deserve one night of proper rest before starting your new position." She looked like she wanted to argue further but was too exhausted to manage it. Instead, she simply nodded. "Thank you, Declan. I will not let you down." They left the cafe together, and Declan walked her the 4 blocks to the Grand Hotel. He paid for a room for one night and arranged for hot water to be brought up for a bath. As he handed Rose the room key, she looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "I have not met many men like you," she said softly. "That probably says more about the men you have met than about me," he replied. "Get some rest. I will meet you in the hotel dining room at 8 tomorrow morning for breakfast, and we will head out to the ranch after." Declan walked back through the darkening streets to the small apartment he kept above the general store for nights when he stayed in town. The place was sparse and impersonal, much like his life had become. He poured himself a whiskey and sat by the window, looking out at the gas lamps flickering along Main Street. For the first time in 3 years, he felt something other than the dull ache of grief that had become his constant companion. He was not sure what to call this new feeling. Anticipation, maybe. Purpose. Whatever it was unfamiliar enough to be unsettling. His wife, Catherine, had been his childhood sweetheart. They had married young, full of dreams about building a life together in the Idaho territory. She had been 8 months pregnant when the complications started. The doctor had tried everything, but in the end, Declan had lost both Catherine and their daughter, whom they had planned to name Margaret. After that, he had simply stopped living in any meaningful way. He went through the motions, working the ranch, playing poker, drinking just enough to numb the pain but not so much that he lost control entirely. He had convinced himself that this half-life was all he deserved, all he could manage. But something about Rose Vaughn had cracked through that careful numbness. Maybe it was the way she held onto her dignity, even in the most degrading circumstances. Maybe it was the intelligence in her eyes or the set of her jaw that said she had been beaten down but never broken. Whatever it was, it made him want to try again. Not to replace what he had lost, but to find a new reason to wake up in the morning. He finished his whiskey and went to bed, sleeping better than he had in months. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect September day that made the Idaho territory feel like paradise. Declan arrived at the hotel dining room exactly at 8 to find Rose already waiting. She wore the same calico dress, but she had clearly bathed and washed her hair, which now fell in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked younger, more vibrant, though still far too thin. "Good morning," he said, taking the seat across from her. "Good morning, Declan. I hope you slept well." "Better than usual, actually. How about you?" "I had forgotten what a real mattress felt like," she admitted. "I almost felt guilty about how comfortable it was." They ordered breakfast, and Declan found himself enjoying the simple pleasure of conversation with someone who seemed genuinely interested in the world around her. Rose asked intelligent questions about the ranch, about Boise, about the challenges of raising cattle in the Idaho territory. She listened carefully to his answers, her mind clearly working through the information, planning ahead. After breakfast, they walked to the livery stable where Declan kept his horses when he stayed in town. He had two with him, his own black gelding named Midnight and a gentle chestnut mare named Penny. He had brought the mare specifically for Rose, hoping his instinct about her would prove correct. "She is beautiful," Rose said, stroking Penny's nose. The mare nickered softly, responding to her gentle touch. "She is patient and steady. Good for the ride out to the ranch." Declan helped Rose mount, noting that she sat in the saddle with the easy confidence of someone who had indeed learned to ride young. They set out from Boise, heading northwest, following a well-worn trail that wound through sagebrush-dotted hills and past stands of cottonwood trees following the Boise River. The morning was cool enough to be pleasant, and as they rode, Declan pointed out various landmarks. There was the old mining claim that had played out 5 years ago, now just a gaping hole in the earth. The homestead of a Swedish family who grew potatoes and sold them in town. The ridge where elk sometimes gathered in the early morning. Rose absorbed it all with obvious interest, asking questions that showed she was thinking not just about the landscape, but about how to live in it, how to make a life here. It made Declan realize how much he had stopped seeing his own surroundings, how he had let everything become gray and meaningless. After about 90 minutes of riding, they crested a hill, and Declan's ranch came into view below them. It sat in a valley with good water access from a creek that fed off the river, protected on 3 sides by gentle hills that broke the worst of the winter winds. The house was a simple 2-story structure made of logs and planed boards, with a wide porch that wrapped around 2 sides. There was a barn, a chicken coop, a smokehouse, and several other outbuildings in various states of repair. "It is beautiful," Rose said, and Declan could hear that she meant it. To him, it looked shabby and neglected, which was exactly what it was. But seeing it through her eyes, he could remember what it had looked like when Catherine was alive, when she had planted flowers by the porch and hung curtains in the windows and filled the space with life and laughter. They rode down to the house, and Declan helped Rose dismount. Up close, the neglect was even more apparent. Weeds choked what had once been Catherine's garden, several shutters hung crooked, the porch railing had a section that needed replacing. "I told you it needed work," he said apologetically. "It needs love," Rose corrected. "There is a difference. Good bones can always be built on. Neglect can always be remedied. What you have here is solid, Declan. It just needs someone to care about it again." Her words struck deeper than she probably intended. They went inside and Declan showed her through the house. The main floor had a large kitchen with a cast iron stove, a dining area, and a sitting room with a stone fireplace. Upstairs were 3 bedrooms. The largest had been his and Catherine's. The second had been prepared as a nursery. The third was smaller, meant for guests or future children. "You can take the guest room," he said, opening the door to show her a space that was dusty but serviceable, with a bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the hills. "I will bring your things up once I take care of the horses." "I do not have any things," Rose reminded him gently. "Everything I owned was taken when my debt was sold." Declan felt another flash of anger at Wheeler, at the whole system that allowed men to treat women like property. "We will go into town this week and get you what you need. Consider it part of your employment package." "Declan, you cannot keep spending money on me like this." "I can and I will. You cannot work properly without proper clothing and supplies. It is a business expense." Rose looked like she wanted to argue but settled for a simple, "Thank you." He left her to settle in and went to take care of the horses, then spent the rest of the day showing her around the property. He had about 50 head of cattle currently, though the ranch could support twice that many. A dozen chickens that somehow survived despite his haphazard care. 3 horses in addition to Midnight and Penny. A milk cow that looked at him reproachfully, as though aware she had been giving milk to a man too depressed to care about making butter or cheese. Rose took mental notes on everything, already planning, already seeing possibilities. As the sun began to set, they returned to the house. Declan showed her the pantry, which was embarrassingly bare, stocked mainly with coffee, beans, and salted meat. "I mostly eat in town," he admitted, "or just do not eat." "That explains why you look like a strong wind could knock you over too," Rose said tartly, then immediately looked apologetic. "I am sorry, that was inappropriate. No, it was accurate. I have not been taking good care of myself." "Well, that is going to change. I cannot run a proper household if my employer collapses from malnutrition. Tomorrow, I am going to make a list of everything we need, and you are going to take me into town to purchase supplies. Then, I am going to cook you a proper meal if it kills me." Declan found himself smiling, really smiling, for the first time in longer than he could remember. "Yes, madam." That evening, he made them a simple meal of beans and cornbread, which they ate at the kitchen table as the last light faded from the sky. Rose talked about her childhood in Kansas, about her parents who had been farmers, about the little schoolhouse where she had learned to read and write and do figures. Declan talked about growing up in Missouri, about coming west with Catherine to find opportunity, about the early days of building the ranch when everything had seemed possible. He did not talk about Catherine's death, and Rose did not push. She seemed to understand that grief had its own timeline, its own rules. After dinner, Rose insisted on washing the dishes despite her long day. Declan built a fire in the sitting room fireplace to ward off the evening chill, and when she finished in the kitchen, she joined him there. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the flames dance. "I want you to know I will work hard for you," Rose said eventually. "I will earn my keep." "I have no doubt of that. But Rose, you do not have to prove anything to me. You have already proven you are strong and capable just by surviving everything you have been through." She looked at him across the firelight, her green eyes thoughtful. "You are a good man, Declan Garrett. Your wife was lucky to have you." "I was the lucky one," he said quietly. "She was everything bright and good in the world. When I lost her, I lost my ability to see color, to feel joy, to believe that anything mattered. I have just been going through motions for 3 years, waiting to die without having the courage to actually do it." "And now?" Rose asked softly. "Now, I think maybe I am tired of just waiting. Maybe it is time to try living again, even if it scares me." "It scares me too," she admitted. "Starting over, trusting someone new, but I am learning that being scared is not a good enough reason to stop trying." They talked for another hour, sharing stories and slowly beginning to know each other. When Rose finally excused herself to go to bed, pleading exhaustion, Declan sat by the fire for a long time afterward, thinking about second chances and new beginnings. Over the next few weeks, the ranch began to transform. Rose threw herself into her work with an energy and enthusiasm that was infectious. She scrubbed the house from top to bottom, mended curtains and linens, planted late-season vegetables in the garden, and reorganized the kitchen until it actually functioned efficiently. More importantly, she filled the house with life again. She hummed while she worked. She talked to the chickens as she collected eggs. She baked bread that made the whole house smell like heaven. She laughed at Declan's dry observations about the neighbors and challenged him when she thought he was being too pessimistic about something. Declan found himself coming in from working the ranch looking forward to meals, to conversation, to simple companionship. Rose was an excellent cook, despite what Wheeler had claimed, and she took visible pride in presenting good food. More than that, she was intelligent and well-read, able to discuss everything from crop rotation to politics to literature. Her parents might have been simple farmers, but they had valued education and had made sure their daughter received one. He also found himself noticing things about her that had nothing to do with her work. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. The little crease that appeared between her eyebrows when she was puzzled. The way her whole face lit up when she smiled genuinely. The gentle competence of her hands, whether she was kneading bread or bandaging a cut on his arm after he scraped it against a fence. These observations troubled him. He had told himself he was simply providing employment to someone who needed it, that he was doing a good deed and getting a clean house and decent meals in return. He had not expected to develop feelings, and he was not sure what to do with them now that they were emerging. Rose seemed equally confused about the dynamic between them. Sometimes he would catch her watching him with an expression he could not quite read. She was always proper, always maintained appropriate boundaries, but there was an undercurrent of something more in their interactions. A connection that went beyond employer and employee. About 6 weeks after Rose arrived at the ranch, Declan made his weekly trip into Boise for supplies. He usually made these trips alone, but this time Rose asked to come along, saying she needed to select some fabric for new curtains and wanted to choose it herself. They rode into town together on a crisp October morning, the aspen trees turning gold on the hillsides. In Boise, they split up to handle different errands, agreeing to meet back at the general store in 2 hours. Declan had just finished loading supplies into his wagon when he saw Marcus Wheeler approaching across the street. His stomach tightened, but he kept his face neutral. "Well, if it is not Garrett," Wheeler said, his voice dripping with false friendliness. "How is that bad bargain working out for you? Has the girl burned down your house yet? Miss Vaughn is an excellent employee, actually. Best decision I have made in years." Wheeler's smile turned nasty. "Employee, is that what you are calling it? Everyone in town knows what you really bought her for. Cannot say I blame you, being a widower and all. A man has needs." Declan felt rage flash through him, hot and immediate. He grabbed Wheeler by the front of his shirt and slammed him against the side of the wagon. "You will not speak about her that way. You will not speak about her at all. And if I hear you have been spreading rumors or saying anything that damages her reputation, I will make you regret it. Am I clear?" Wheeler's eyes widened with fear, but he tried to maintain his bravado. "You are threatening me. In broad daylight on Main Street, I am promising you. There is a difference." Declan released him with a shove. "Stay away from my ranch, stay away from Rose, and keep your filthy mouth shut about things you know nothing about." He turned away, trying to control his breathing, to calm the adrenaline coursing through his system. He had not felt this strongly about anything in 3 years, and it shook him to realize how much he cared about protecting Rose's reputation, about defending her honor. When he met Rose back at the general store, she took one look at his face and asked, "What happened?" Ran into Wheeler. "It is handled. Did he say something about me? Declan hesitated, not wanting to repeat Wheeler's crude insinuations, but Rose was too perceptive to be fooled. "He made assumptions about our arrangement, did he not?" she said quietly. "About why you really took me in." "His assumptions say everything about him and nothing about you. I set him straight." They loaded the rest of the supplies in tense silence. On the ride back to the ranch, Rose finally spoke. "I appreciate you defending my honor, Declan. But you should know that I do not care what people like Marcus Wheeler think of me. I know the truth of my situation, and that is enough." "It is not enough for me. You deserve to be treated with respect." "Why do you care so much?" The question was genuine, not accusatory. Declan guided Midnight around a rough patch in the trail before answering. "Because you are a good person who has had a run of bad luck. Because you work hard and deserve to be recognized for that, not judged by small minds and smaller men. Because you have brought life back to my home and made me remember what it feels like to be human again. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being just my employee and started being my friend, and I protect my friends." Rose was quiet for a long moment. "You are my friend too, Declan. The best friend I have ever had, if I am being honest. I do not know what I would have done if you had not walked into that saloon when you did. You would have survived. You would have found a way. That is what you do. Maybe, but I am glad I did not have to find out." When they got back to the ranch, they unloaded the supplies together, working in the easy rhythm they had developed over the past weeks. That evening, Rose made pot roast with vegetables from her garden, and they ate dinner talking about plans for the ranch, about whether to expand the cattle herd next spring, about which crops might do well in the Idaho climate. Later, sitting by the fire as had become their habit, Rose brought up something that had clearly been on her mind. "Declan, I have been here almost 2 months now. I have been keeping track of my wages, and I have more than enough to pay off my original debt to Mrs. Patterson. I could be free and clear." Declan felt his chest tighten, though he tried to keep his voice neutral. "You want to leave?" "No," she said quickly. "That is not what I meant. I just wanted you to know that I am staying by choice now, not because I am obligated to. If you want me to leave, of course I will go, but if you want me to stay, I would like to continue our arrangement." Relief washed through him. "I would very much like you to stay, for as long as you want to. Then it is settled. Though we should probably discuss a new arrangement since I am no longer working off a debt. The current terms seem fair to me. $30 a month plus room and board, unless you think you deserve more, in which case we can negotiate." Rose smiled. "The current terms are more than generous. I just wanted everything to be clear and above board." "It is. Rose, I want you to understand something. You are free. You can leave any time you want, for any reason or no reason at all. I am not holding your contract over you. You are here because you choose to be, and I am grateful for that choice every single day." She met his eyes across the firelight, and something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. "I am grateful, too, for all of this, for you." The autumn deepened into winter, bringing cold winds and occasional snow to the Idaho territory. Declan and Rose fell into comfortable rhythms, working together to prepare the ranch for the harsh months ahead. They insulated the barn, laid in supplies of feed for the animals, stocked the pantry and root cellar, split wood for the fireplaces and stove. The work was hard but satisfying, and doing it together created a bond that grew stronger with each passing day. Declan found himself thinking about Rose constantly when they were apart, looking forward to meals and evenings by the fire, treasuring her observations and insights and the way she challenged him to see the world differently. He was falling in love with her. The realization came gradually. Then all at once, hitting him one morning in early December when he came inside from feeding the animals to find her making pancakes and singing softly to herself. She looked up and smiled at him, flour dusting her cheek, and his heart simply stopped. This was nothing like what he had felt for Catherine. That had been young love, built on shared history and innocent dreams. What he felt for Rose was deeper, more complex, forged in loss and survival and the slow rebuilding of broken things. It was a love that knew the world was hard and chose to be soft anyway. A love that had stared into darkness and decided to seek light, but loving her and telling her were two different things. He had no idea if she felt the same way. She had given him no clear indication that her feelings went beyond friendship and gratitude. The last thing he wanted was to make her uncomfortable, to abuse the power dynamic that still existed between them, even though he tried to minimize it. He decided to wait, to watch, to see if she gave him any sign that she might welcome his affection as more than just a friend. Rose was dealing with her own internal struggles. She had known she was falling in love with Declan for weeks now, maybe from that very first night when he had bought her contract and taken her to dinner, instead of dragging her off to use her however he pleased. Every day since had only deepened her feelings. She loved his quiet strength, the way he treated animals with gentle respect, the sadness in his eyes that was slowly being replaced by something lighter. She loved how he listened when she talked, really listened, treating her opinions as valuable. She loved his dry sense of humor and the rare smiles that transformed his whole face. She loved the man he had been before grief broke him and the man he was becoming as he healed, but she had no idea how he felt about her. He was kind and respectful, certainly. He had defended her honor and made her feel safe. But kindness and protection were not the same as love. For all she knew, he saw her as a charity case, a project to make himself feel better, or at worst, a pale substitute for the wife he had lost. She could not bear the thought of declaring her feelings only to discover he did not return them. The ranch had become her home, Declan her anchor in a chaotic world. If she ruined that by pushing for something he did not want, she would lose everything. So she stayed quiet, worked hard, and tried to show her care through actions rather than words. The tension between them grew as winter settled in. Small touches became charged with meaning. Hands brushing when passing dishes at dinner, standing close while working on a difficult task. Long looks across the room that said everything and nothing. In mid-December, a massive snowstorm hit the Idaho territory, dumping 3 feet of snow in 2 days and isolating the ranch completely. Declan and Rose worked together to keep the animals fed and warm, to maintain paths between the house and outbuildings, to keep the fireplaces burning. On the second night of the storm, with wind howling around the house and snow piling against the windows, they sat closer to the fire than usual, trying to ward off the cold that crept through every crack and crevice. Rose shivered despite the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "You are freezing," Declan observed. "I am fine, just not used to Idaho winters yet. Come here." He held out his arm, making space for her on the sofa beside him. Rose hesitated only a moment before moving closer. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, sharing his warmth, and she leaned against him with a sigh of relief. They sat like that for a long time, listening to the storm rage outside and the fire crackle in the hearth. "This reminds me of storms in Kansas," Rose said quietly. "My father used to say that bad weather showed you what your house was really made of. If it could stand up to the worst nature could throw at it, you knew you had built something solid." Smart man. He was. I miss him terribly. I miss both of them. Tell me about them. Rose talked about her parents, about her father's gentle wisdom and her mother's fierce love. about growing up on a farm that was always one bad season away from disaster, but somehow always managed to survive. Declan listened, asking questions, helping her remember the good times instead of just focusing on the loss. In turn, he found himself telling her about Catherine, really talking about her for the first time since she died. He described her laugh, her stubborn determination to make the ranch succeed, her excitement about becoming a mother. He talked about the day she died, about holding her hand as the life left her eyes, about burying her and their daughter in the small cemetery outside Boise. "I thought I would never feel anything again," he admitted. "I thought grief had burned away everything else inside me, left me hollow." "But you were wrong," Rose asked softly. "I was wrong. Somehow, without me even noticing it happening, you filled up all those hollow spaces. You made me want to live again, Rose, really live, not just exist." She pulled back slightly to look at his face. In the firelight, his expression was open, vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. "Declan," she whispered, her heart pounding, "what are you saying?" "I am saying that I love you. I am saying that somewhere between buying your contract and tonight, you became the most important person in my world. I am saying that I wake up happy because I know I will see you, and I go to sleep grateful that you are under the same roof. I am saying that if you do not feel the same way, I will understand and nothing has to change between us, but I could not keep pretending anymore." Rose felt tears spring to her eyes. "You love me, completely, utterly, terrifyingly. I know it is too soon. I know I am still healing. I know you might not be ready or might not feel the same way, but Rose, I love you with everything I have left in me to love." "It is not too soon," she said, her voice breaking. "And I do feel the same way. I have been in love with you for weeks, maybe months, but I was too afraid to say anything. I thought you still loved Catherine too much to have room for anyone else. I thought you would always see me as the woman you rescued, not as someone you could actually love. I will always love Catherine. She was my first love, and she gave me some of the happiest years of my life. But she is gone, and I am still here, and so are you. Loving you does not diminish what I felt for her. If anything, knowing that kind of love was possible once makes me even more certain about what I feel for you now." Rose reached up and touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "I love you, Declan Garrett. I love your kindness and your strength and your wounded heart that is learning to beat again. I love how you see me as a whole person, not just a debt or a servant or a burden. I love the life we are building together here." He leaned down and kissed her, gently at first, then with growing passion as she responded eagerly. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, faces flushed with something that had nothing to do with the fire. "We should probably talk about what this means," Declan said, his forehead resting against hers. "It means everything has changed," Rose replied. "It means I am not just your employee anymore. You were never just my employee. But you are right, we need to figure out how to move forward. Rose, I want to marry you. I want you to be my wife, not my housekeeper. But I know it has only been a few months since we met, and I do not want to rush you into anything you are not ready for." "How could I not be ready? You saved my life, Declan. You gave me a home and safety and respect and love. How could I want anything except to spend the rest of my life with you? Because marriage is different. It is permanent, or it should be. I need you to be absolutely certain that this is what you want." Rose kissed him again, pouring all her certainty and love into it. "I am absolutely certain. Yes, I will marry you whenever you want, wherever you want. Yes." They held each other as the storm continued to rage outside, making plans and promises, kissing and talking and slowly allowing themselves to believe in the happiness they had both thought was lost forever. When the fire finally burned low, Declan walked Rose up to her bedroom, kissed her good night at the door with aching tenderness, and forced himself to go to his own room. "Only until we are married," he said. "I want to do this properly with respect." "I appreciate that," Rose said, though her flushed face and rapid breathing suggested she would not have minded if he had been less proper. "How long does it take to arrange a wedding in Boise?" "I have no idea, but I intend to find out as soon as this storm clears." The storm lasted another full day before finally blowing itself out, leaving the ranch buried in pristine white snow. Declan and Rose spent the time planning their future, working side by side to keep the household running, and stealing kisses whenever the opportunity arose. As soon as the roads were passable, they rode into Boise together. Their first stop was the small church at the end of Main Street, where Reverend Thomas agreed to perform the ceremony. Their second stop was the general store, where Rose selected fabric for a simple but beautiful wedding dress that Mrs. Chen, who also did seamstress work, agreed to make on short notice. Word spread quickly through the small town that Declan Garrett was getting married. Most people were genuinely happy for him, knowing what he had been through. A few raised eyebrows about the speed of the engagement, but anyone who saw Declan and Rose together could see the authentic affection between them. Marcus Wheeler, predictably, was among the doubters. He made a few snide comments in the Silver Spur saloon about Declan marrying damaged goods, about Rose using her feminine wiles to trap a grieving widower. When those comments got back to Declan through mutual acquaintances, he paid Wheeler a visit. He found the man outside the land office conducting some business. Declan walked up calmly and said, loud enough for passers-by to hear, "Wheeler, I am going to say this once and only once. Rose Vaughn is going to be my wife. That makes her family. If you say one more word against her, I will respond the way family responds to insults. I am not threatening violence because I know that would be illegal. I am simply making you aware that there are many legal ways to make someone's life very difficult in this territory, and I have friends in positions that could make such difficulties a reality. Do we understand each other?" Wheeler's face went red, but he was smart enough to recognize a serious warning when he heard one. "We understand each other. Good. I hope you find happiness, Wheeler. I truly do, but stay away from me and mine." Declan walked away feeling lighter, as though confronting Wheeler had finally closed a chapter on the whole sordid episode of how he and Rose had met. The wedding was planned for the day after Christmas, giving Mrs. Chen time to finish the dress and allowing some of Declan's friends from the surrounding ranches to travel in despite winter conditions. Rose had no family to invite, a fact that saddened her, but she focused on the joy of marrying Declan rather than dwelling on what she had lost. On Christmas Eve, Declan surprised Rose with a gift. It was a beautiful wooden box hand-carved with intricate patterns. "Open it," he urged. Inside, nestled on velvet, was a ring. Not an expensive diamond, which would have been impractical and out of place in their simple life, but a gold band with a small green stone. "It is an emerald," Declan explained. "It reminded me of your eyes. Catherine's ring was a different style entirely, so this is just yours. I wanted you to have something that was only about us, about our future, not about the past." Rose slipped it on her finger and it fit perfectly. "It is beautiful. I will treasure it always. I am supposed to wait until the ceremony to give it to you officially, but I wanted you to have it now. I wanted you to know how much tomorrow means to me." They spent Christmas Day quietly at the ranch, cooking together and enjoying the peace of new snow and bright winter sunshine. That night, Rose slept in her own bed for the last time, too excited about the next day to rest properly. The morning of December 26, 1878, dawned clear and cold. Rose dressed in the gown Mrs. Chen had created, a simple but elegant design in cream-colored silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. She styled her auburn hair in a soft updo with a few curls framing her face. When Declan saw her standing at the back of the church, he felt his breath catch. She was radiant, glowing with happiness and hope and love. As she walked down the aisle toward him, he saw not just her beauty but her strength, her resilience, her capacity for joy even after everything she had endured. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Reverend Thomas spoke about love as a choice, about commitment as a daily decision to honor and cherish another person. Declan and Rose exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to support each other through whatever challenges life brought, to build a home filled with love and laughter, to create a family together. When Declan slipped the emerald ring onto Rose's finger and said, "With this ring I thee wed," his voice was thick with emotion. When Rose responded with her own vows, promising to love him all the days of her life, tears streamed down her face. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Thomas declared. "Declan, you may kiss your bride." Declan cupped Rose's face in his hands and kissed her with all the love and promise and hope he felt in his heart. The small gathering of friends and neighbors erupted in applause. The reception was held at the hotel dining room, with food and music and dancing. Declan, who had not danced since Catherine died, found himself swept onto the floor by his new wife, moving to a waltz played by a small ensemble. Rose fit perfectly in his arms, following his lead with natural grace. "Are you happy?" he asked as they swayed together. "Happier than I have ever been in my entire life," she answered honestly. "You gave me everything, Declan. Freedom, safety, love, a future. I will spend the rest of my life trying to give you the same. You already have. You gave me a reason to believe in love again, Rose. You saved me just as much as I saved you." They stayed at the celebration until evening, then rode back to the ranch through the snowy landscape under a sky full of stars. This time, when they reached the house, Declan carried Rose over the threshold and straight up the stairs to what was now their bedroom. They made love slowly, tenderly, learning each other with patience and care. For both of them, it was a new beginning, a washing away of past sorrows and present fears. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, talking quietly and making plans for their future. "I want children," Rose said. "If we are blessed with them, is that something you want?" Declan was quiet for a moment, thinking about the daughter he had lost before he ever got to hold her. "I want that very much. It scares me after what happened to Catherine, but I want to build a family with you, Rose. I want to fill this house with life and noise and love. Then we will. And it will be beautiful and hard and worth every moment." They fell asleep in each other's arms, husband and wife, partners in every sense of the word. The winter passed in a haze of happiness. Declan and Rose worked the ranch together, cared for the animals, made improvements to the property. They read books aloud by the fire, cooked meals together, made love often and with growing confidence and passion. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's rhythms and preferences, building the intimacy that comes from truly sharing a life. In early spring, Rose discovered she was pregnant. She told Declan over breakfast one morning, watching his face carefully, knowing this news would bring up complicated emotions. He sat very still for a long moment, processing. Then he stood, walked around the table and pulled her into his arms. "Are you happy?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I am terrified and thrilled in equal measure. How about you?" "The same. Rose, I need you to know that I am going to worry. I am going to be overprotective and probably drive you crazy with my caution. But I am also so grateful. so happy that we are creating new life together. I am scared too, she admitted. But I am also strong, and we have the best doctor in Boise, and I believe we are going to be fine. Declan made her promise to take things easy, to let him handle the heavier work around the ranch. Rose agreed, though she continued to do most of the household work and cooking, because sitting idle drove her mad. They told their friends and neighbors, who offered congratulations and advice in equal measure. The pregnancy progressed normally. Rose had morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, but otherwise felt healthy and strong. Her body changed, growing round with their child, and Declan marveled at the miracle of it. In late October, as the leaves turned gold again and the anniversary of their first meeting approached, Rose went into labor. Declan rode to Boise at breakneck speed to fetch Dr. Morrison, then paced the downstairs of the house while the doctor and Mrs. Chen, who had come to assist, attended to Rose upstairs. The labor was long and difficult, lasting well into the next day. Every cry from Rose tore at Declan's heart. He remembered Catherine's screams, remembered the terrible silence that had followed. He prayed harder than he had ever prayed in his life, making bargains with God, promising anything if only Rose and the baby would survive. Finally, as the sun set on the second day, he heard a different sound. A baby's cry, strong and angry and absolutely beautiful. Mrs. Chen appeared at the top of the stairs, smiling broadly. "You can come up now, Mr. Garrett. You have a son and your wife is asking for you." Declan took the stairs 3 at a time. In the bedroom, Rose lay propped against pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. Dr. Morrison stood by the window, packing his bag, looking satisfied. "Mother and baby are both healthy," the doctor announced. "It was a difficult birth, but she is strong. She will recover well with proper rest." Declan barely heard him. He was already at Rose's side, looking down at their son. The baby had a shock of dark hair and Rose's green eyes, already alert and taking in the world around him. "He is perfect," Declan whispered, his voice breaking. "He looks like you," Rose said, smiling tiredly. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never settled on anything definite. Looking at his son, Declan thought about new beginnings and second chances. "Daniel," he suggested. "Daniel Garrett. It means God is my judge, a reminder that we were given this gift when we might not have deserved it." "Daniel," Rose repeated, testing the name. "I love it. Hello, Daniel. Welcome to the world, little one." Declan sat carefully on the edge of the bed, putting his arm around Rose and looking down at their son. "Thank you," he said to his wife. "Thank you for this, for him, for everything. We did this together," she reminded him. "We created this beautiful new life because we found each other and were brave enough to love again." Dr. Morrison and Mrs. Chen left them alone with their new son. Declan stayed by Rose's side all night, holding her hand when she slept, holding Daniel when he fussed, marveling at how much his life had changed in just 1 year. The first months of Daniel's life were exhausting and wonderful. Rose recovered well from the birth, and she took to motherhood with the same competence she brought to everything else. Declan was a devoted father, getting up for nighttime feedings, changing diapers, singing soft lullabies he remembered from his own childhood. As Daniel grew from an infant into a curious, active baby, the ranch thrived as well. Declan expanded the cattle herd, built new outbuildings, and even hired a young man from town to help with the heavier work so he could spend more time with his family. Rose continued to manage the household, though she insisted on hiring a girl from town to help with some of the heavier cleaning now that she had a baby to care for. They fell into new rhythms as a family. Evenings by the fire now included Daniel between them, playing with wooden toys Declan carved by hand. Meals were often interrupted by a fussy baby who needed attention. Nights were broken by crying and feeding and changing, but neither of them minded because this was the life they had dreamed of. When Daniel was 8 months old, Rose discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news brought joy without the same level of fear, though Declan still worried about her health. "We are building our family," Rose said, her hand on her still flat belly. "We are creating something beautiful together." Their second child, a daughter they named Dorothy, was born in the summer of 1880. The birth was easier than Daniel's had been, and Dorothy emerged with a powerful set of lungs and her father's dark eyes. Rose recovered quickly, managing 2 children under the age of 2 with impressive grace. The ranch house that had once been silent and sad was now filled with noise and chaos and life. Toys scattered across the floor. Laundry constantly needed washing. The kitchen was always busy with cooking and feeding and cleaning up. It was exhausting and messy and absolutely perfect. On their 3rd wedding anniversary, after they had put the children to bed, Declan and Rose sat together on the porch watching the sun set over the hills. They had developed a tradition of spending this time together each evening when weather permitted, reconnecting after the busy day, remembering what they meant to each other beyond their roles as parents and partners. "You remember what you said to me that first night?" Rose asked, leaning against Declan's shoulder. "In the cafe when you told me your terms for employment." "I said a lot of things that night." "Which part?" "You said maybe you were looking for a chance to do one decent thing in a world that seemed to have forgotten what decency meant." "I remember." "You did so much more than one decent thing, Declan. You gave me my life back. You gave me love and safety and children and a home. You gave me everything. And you gave me a reason to believe in love again," he replied, pulling her closer. "You took a broken man and helped him heal. You filled empty spaces with light and laughter. You gave me back my future, Rose. We saved each other," she said simply. "That is what love does. It sees someone drowning and jumps in to help them swim to shore, even if it means risking everything." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the evening sounds of the ranch, the cattle settling for the night, the crickets beginning their song, the distant call of an owl. "I have been thinking," Declan said eventually, "about expanding the ranch. We have the land and the resources. I could hire more help, increase the herd significantly. We could build something really substantial to leave to Daniel and Dorothy and any other children we might have." "Other children?" Rose asked with a smile. "Are 2 not enough?" "I will take however many we are blessed with, but only if you want more. I know it is hard on you." "It is hard, but worth it. I think I would like a big family, Declan. I was an only child and it was lonely. I want our children to have siblings to rely on, to love and fight with and share their lives with. Then we will fill this house with children and love and all the noise that comes with both." Over the next several years, their family continued to grow. Rose gave birth to another son, Marcus, in 1882, and twin girls, Grace and Margaret, in 1884. The house expanded to accommodate the growing family, with Declan and hired hands adding new rooms and a second-floor addition. The ranch grew as well, becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. Declan's reputation as a fair employer and skilled rancher spread, and he began to serve on the territorial council, helping to shape policy and advocate for fair treatment of workers. Rose, meanwhile, became known for her hospitality and her advocacy for women's rights. She started a small school on the ranch property for their children and the children of neighboring families, believing strongly in education as a path to opportunity. She also worked with the church to establish a fund to help women in situations like the one she had been in, providing loans and support to prevent them from falling into debt servitude. Through it all, the love between Declan and Rose only deepened. They had their arguments and disagreements, as any couple does, but they had learned how to fight fair and forgive fully. They made time for each other even as their responsibilities grew, still spending evenings together on the porch, still stealing kisses in quiet moments, still finding ways to show each other love and appreciation. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Declan arranged for Mrs. Chen to watch the children overnight so he could take Rose into Boise for a special dinner, and a night at the hotel where he had first arranged for her to stay. It felt fitting to return to where their story had begun, to remember how far they had come. Over dinner, they reminisced about that first night, about how uncertain and fragile everything had seemed. "I was so scared," Rose admitted. "I did not know if I could trust you, if your offer was genuine or just another trap." "I was terrified too," Declan confessed. "I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew I could not walk away and leave you in that situation." $20, Rose mused. "That is all it took to change both our lives completely. $20 and a willingness to take a chance on a stranger." "Best $20 I ever spent," Declan said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "You have given me 10 years of happiness I never thought I would feel again. You have given me 5 beautiful children and a life full of purpose and meaning. How could I possibly measure the value of that?" "I love you, Declan Garrett, more today than the day we married, and I will love you even more tomorrow." "And I love you, Rose Garrett, with everything I am and everything I have. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I thank God every day that I walked into that saloon at exactly the right moment to find you." They spent the night at the hotel, making love with the leisure and privacy they rarely had at home with 5 children. In the morning, they walked through Boise hand in hand, visiting the cafe where they had their first real conversation, the church where they were married, the places that marked the key moments in their journey together. When they returned to the ranch in the late afternoon, they were greeted by the chaos of children eager to see their parents, by Mrs. Chen reporting on various minor disasters and triumphs, by the familiar sights and sounds and smells of home. Declan looked around at the life they had built together and felt profound gratitude wash over him. He had thought his story was over when Catherine died, that he had used up all his chances at happiness. But Rose had shown him that love was not a finite resource, that hearts could heal and open again, that second chances were possible for those brave enough to reach for them. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and challenges. In 1886, a harsh winter killed several head of cattle, creating financial strain. But the family pulled together, economizing and working harder, and they weathered the difficulty. In 1889, Daniel broke his arm falling from a horse, giving everyone a scare but healing well under Dr. Morrison's care. In 1891, a fire in the barn was caught quickly and extinguished before major damage occurred, though it reminded them how fragile prosperity could be. Through it all, Declan and Rose faced each challenge together, their partnership growing stronger with each test. They celebrated successes and mourned losses. They disciplined children and encouraged dreams. They built a life that was messy and imperfect and absolutely real. As their children grew older, Declan and Rose began to think about legacy, about what they wanted to leave behind. They had built a successful ranch, but more importantly, they had built a family founded on love and respect, and the belief that everyone deserved dignity and opportunity. They watched Daniel grow into a thoughtful young man with his father's steady competence and his mother's sharp mind. Dorothy developed a passion for healing, learning everything she could from Dr. Morrison and dreaming of becoming a doctor herself someday. Marcus showed a talent for working with horses that seemed almost magical. The twins, Grace and Margaret, were inseparable and endlessly creative, always building or inventing or imagining something new. In 1895, when Daniel turned 16, Declan sat him down for a serious conversation about the future of the ranch. "This will all be yours someday," Declan explained, gesturing to encompass the property. "You and your siblings. But I want you to understand that owning land is not just about possession. It is about stewardship. It is about taking care of what you have been given and passing it on better than you found it." "I understand, Pa," Daniel said seriously. "You and Ma have shown us that through your example. You have always treated people fairly, worked hard, and given back to the community. That is the legacy I want to continue." Declan felt pride swell in his chest. His son had grown into exactly the kind of man he had hoped to raise. As the 19th century drew to a close, Declan and Rose entered their 50s, having built a life beyond anything they could have imagined that night in the Silver Spur Saloon. Their hair showed gray. Their faces bore the lines of years spent outdoors and raising children, but their eyes still lit up when they looked at each other. On their 20th anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. Daniel, now 21 and running most of the ranch operations, gave a toast. "20 years ago, my father bought my mother's freedom for $20. It was an act of decency in a world that too often lacks it, but that was just the beginning of their story. They built a life together based on love, respect, and partnership. They created a home where we all felt safe and valued. They showed us what marriage should look like, what love means, what it takes to build something lasting. Ma, Pa, thank you for the example you set and the family you created. We love you both." Declan and Rose looked around the table at their children, at the friends who had become like family, at the life they had built together over 2 decades. They held hands under the table, fingers interlaced in the familiar, comfortable way of long partnership. Later that night, alone again in their bedroom, they held each other close. "You have any regrets?" Rose asked. "Not a single one," Declan answered honestly. "Everything, the good and the bad, led me to you. How could I regret any of it? I used to think being sold into debt servitude was the worst thing that ever happened to me," Rose said thoughtfully. "But if it had not happened, I never would have ended up in that saloon. You never would have seen me. We never would have found each other. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. You gave me a reason to believe in love again," Declan said, repeating the words he had said so many times over the years, words that never lost their truth or power. "You saved my life just as surely as I saved yours." "We saved each other," Rose corrected gently. "That is what love does. It sees someone struggling and reaches out a hand. It takes risks and makes sacrifices. It chooses hope even when the world seems hopeless." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, as they had every night for 20 years, as they would for all the years to come. The new century brought changes to the Idaho Territory, which became a state in 1890. Boise continued to grow and modernize. Automobiles began to appear on the streets, though horses still far outnumbered them. Electricity came to town, though the ranch would not be wired for several more years. The world was changing rapidly, but the fundamental truths of love and family remained constant. Declan and Rose aged gracefully, shifting more responsibilities to their adult children while remaining active in the community. They became grandparents when Daniel married a schoolteacher named Sarah in 1902 and had their first child in 1903. Dorothy, pursuing her dream despite significant obstacles, became one of the first female doctors in Idaho. opening a practice in Boise in 1904. Marcus took over the horse breeding program, developing a line of working ranch horses that became known throughout the territory. Grace and Margaret, still inseparable, opened a bakery in Boise that quickly became famous for its pies and pastries. Watching their children build their own lives and families, Declan and Rose felt the satisfaction of a job well done. They had not just survived their hardships, they had thrived and created a foundation for future generations to build upon. In 1908, on their 30th anniversary, they returned once more to the hotel in Boise where they had spent their 10th anniversary, where their relationship had first begun. The hotel had modernized, adding electric lights and indoor plumbing, but the dining room still had the same warm atmosphere. They were older now, Declan 62 and Rose 53, but the love between them burned as bright as ever. They sat at dinner holding hands across the table, not caring who saw or what anyone thought. 30 years, Rose marveled. When I was standing in that saloon, being wagered like property, I could not have imagined living another 30 days, much less building a life that would span 30 years and still be going strong. When I walked into that saloon, I was already dead inside, Declan said. I was just waiting for my body to catch up with my spirit. You brought me back to life, Rose. Every day since has been a gift I never expected to receive. We have built something beautiful together, Rose said, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. A family, a home, a legacy of love and fairness and hope. That matters, Declan. What we have done matters. It matters because we matter, he replied. You matter, you always did, even when the world tried to tell you otherwise. And together, we have shown our children that everyone matters, that everyone deserves respect and opportunity and love. They raised their glasses in a toast, to the past and the present and the future, to the love that had sustained them through everything, to the life they had built from $20, and a moment of compassion that changed 2 lives forever. The years continued their steady march forward. Declan and Rose grew older but never lost the essential connection that had drawn them together. They celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, welcomed more grandchildren, mourned the loss of friends, and supported each other through the inevitable challenges that came with aging. In 1915, they celebrated their 37th anniversary quietly at home, too tired these days for trips into town. They sat on the porch as they had done thousands of times before, watching the sun set over the familiar landscape. I am slowing down, Declan admitted. I used to be able to work from dawn to dusk without getting tired. Now I need a nap after lunch. We are both slowing down, Rose said gently. That is what happens. But we have earned our rest, Declan. We have worked hard, raised good children, built something lasting. Now we get to enjoy the fruits of all that labor. I want you to know, Declan said seriously, that these years with you have been the happiest of my life. Every single day, even the hard ones, has been precious because I got to share it with you. I feel the same way, Rose replied, tears forming in her eyes. You gave me everything, Declan. Not just freedom from debt, but freedom to be myself, to love and be loved, to build the life I wanted. You saw me as a person when others saw me as property. You treated me with respect when others treated me with contempt. You loved me when I had stopped believing anyone ever would again. They sat together as darkness fell, holding hands and remembering, always remembering the journey that had brought them to this moment. Declan Garrett died peacefully in his sleep on a cold January night in 1918, at the age of 72. Rose was beside him, as she had been for nearly 40 years. When she woke to find him gone, she felt a grief as profound as any she had ever known, but it was tempered by gratitude for the life they had shared. At his funeral, The church was packed with family and friends whose lives Declan had touched. Daniel gave the eulogy, speaking about his father's integrity, his kindness, his commitment to doing what was right even when it was difficult. "My father saw someone in need and helped without hesitation," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. That simple act of decency changed not just one life, but created a ripple effect that touched hundreds of lives. Every person in this room has been blessed in some way by the love between my parents, by the example they set, by the family they created. That is his legacy, and it will live on through all of us. Rose sat in the front pew, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, feeling the weight of loss but also the strength of family. She had been loved deeply and had loved in return. She had built a life of meaning and purpose. She had been blessed beyond measure. She lived another 7 years, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, writing down the story of her life so that future generations would know where they came from, what their family had overcome. She remained sharp and active until very near the end, still tending her garden, still baking bread, still offering wisdom to anyone who asked. Rose Garrett died on a sunny spring morning in 1925, at the age of 70, with her children gathered around her bed. Her last words were simple but profound. "I had a good life," she whispered. "I was loved and I loved in return. That is all anyone can ask for." She was buried next to Declan in the family cemetery on the ranch, under the shade of cottonwood trees they had planted together 40 years earlier. The headstone bore a simple inscription: "Declan and Rose Garrett together in life. Together in eternity he gave her freedom. She gave him love. Together they built a legacy that endures. Their story became part of family lore, passed down through generations." The ranch remained in the family, worked by their descendants who honored the values Declan and Rose had established. The school Rose started continued to operate, eventually becoming an established institution in the county. Dorothy's medical practice grew into a clinic that served the community for decades. But more than any physical legacy, Declan and Rose left behind the example of what love could accomplish. They showed that compassion could change lives, that second chances were possible, that broken people could heal and build something beautiful together. They proved that love was not about grand gestures but about daily choices to honor, respect, and cherish another person. They had started with $20 and a moment of decency in a saloon. They had built a love story that spanned 4 decades, produced 5 children and countless grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and demonstrated the transformative power of seeing another person's humanity and choosing to help. Their great-grandchildren would tell the story to their own children, ensuring that Declan and Rose's love story never faded into obscurity. It became a touchstone for the family, a reminder of where they came from and what values they should uphold. He had bought her freedom for $20. She had given him a reason to believe in love again. Together, they had created something that would outlast them both, a legacy of love and hope that would echo through generations, proving that sometimes the best investments we make are in other people, and that love, real love, can transform everything it touches.